It's December. It's almost Christmas time. And it's prediction time. So this is the ridiculous thing about December. A lot of people sitting down because it's a great kind of content that you can create because a lot of people like to hear how 23 will look like. So we focus on data. And I can already see there are people out there already posting their kind of prediction for data for 2023. And I'm a little bit, how to say, I'm a little bit underwhelmed by that. So because when I'm reading all these different kind of predictions, which I read right now, and I hope I will read some more, and I hope I will read some more really interesting ones, because like the ones that I have read so far, they really have this kind of problems. I mean, no one is basically precise with anything. So they come up with like 23 will be the big year of data culture. 23 will be the big year of data quality, and so on. So I can just pick this stuff and put it, I think, on hold for the next 5 years in slightly different ways, and I would still be okay. So I don't know. I mean, in the end, like, please go into details. Show us what you really think about like detailed things and not like this high blah 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 stuff. This is the big problem we have in data right now. Everyone is flying on this kind of high layer, and so on. So in the end, how to say is like, let's make a really bold prediction for 2023. And this bold prediction is basically like, data teams have to prove that they cannot just talk about things, but they can deliver things and they can impact the business. Impact the business. And sounds ridiculous? Yeah, maybe. But in the end, a dashboard has no impact on a business. Yes, it can help a little bit to impact some people with some decisions and so on, but honestly, this is not enough. This is not what we can do. I mean, the cool thing about data teams is like, these are highly talented people. You are highly talented people. So we can do better. So my prediction for 23 is like, and I have this basically for every year, is like, I want to create more value, and I want data teams to create more value and more impact for the business, really become the strong force within a company that is basically driving it forward to create better products, better services, more growth, more revenue, happy people, happy world, whatever. So anything like this. And I hope that 23 will not be around like, oh, there's this new kind of interesting new category of tools. I don't know, like data catalog last year or this year. Oh no, it's still this year. So like data catalogs. So I don't hope that we just restrict ourselves to jumping on the next hype train about like, ooh, look, there's another cool new tool, and basically dump all our time and resources on it. Instead, like figuring out how we can make impact. So this is not a prediction, this is a wish. But I have some predictions. I really have some predictions, and let's get into prediction number 1. It will be a very troubling year for Google Analytics 4. And not that 22 was a great year for Google Analytics 4, but I think it will continue like this in 23. So all the people who are hoping like, oh yeah, they will basically figure it out, they will put more resources on top, and so no, they won't. Yes, maybe they put some resources on top, but I did this one video where I was explaining why I think Google Analytics 4 is really like, has a really big problem. And I still think the problem will be the root cause for all the problems that we will see next year as well. And it's like, they don't really have a clear targeting for what kind of audience they have built this kind of tool. Google Analytics was always like a very, how to say, the most common analytics tool. And I think this would be still like a spot that could work. But for some reasons, they were trying to go more for the pros, but also keep the other ones who are not really good. And this basically creates this kind of, let's say, this setup for disaster. Who will benefit of that? And I would say most likely Pivot Pro, especially for the audience of people who are who need more simple approach to some kind of data, who don't look for these very, very specific pro approaches, and who really invested a lot of time to learn how Google Analytics Universal, so the old one that will be shut down also next year, how this works. So Pivot Pro is pretty much like Google Analytics Universal. So everyone who really has invested time to understand how to work with Google Analytics Universal will happy to go over to Pivot Pro. Yes, it's slightly different, it looks a little bit different, but in the end, if you know how to use GA Universal, you know how to use Pivot Pro. And Pivot will invest a lot into making this whole transition as smooth as possible. So I would say they will definitely win from that. Matomo also might win, because like Matomo in the end is like the solution if you even want to go a step further than Pivot and you say, oh, I better want to really have a full open source kind of project. And so then you can use Matomo. I have one tool which I think will really win, which maybe most of you don't have on your list, and this will be Amplitude. And so the interesting thing about Amplitude is like everyone is like, oh yeah, it's a product analytics, why should we do this? I hear this quite often when I mention them. And so the interesting thing is like Amplitude has invested heavily into extending their product this year already. So we just got general availability of their new features like marketing channel grouping, which is super important for everyone who knows this from Google Analytics, and marketing attribution, so marketing campaign attribution. So you can now run the same kind of marketing reports that you're usually running in Google Analytics, and you can run it in Amplitude, especially for companies with really pro analysts, pro use cases who really want to dive deep, do really like deep kind of analysis, but don't want to offload all this down to data engineers or analytics engineers to create these custom kind of things for them. I think for all these kind of teams, so especially growth teams, Amplitude will be a very interesting alternative, and I think we will see a lot more adoption beyond the typical original product space. Okay, prediction number 2. When Snowplow is playing their new cloud offering the right way, they will get significant shares from potential projects that usually will land in the space of Segment or Rudderstack. So, some context. Snowplow has announced a cloud version, I think just a month ago. So what does it mean? Snowplow before was basically either an open source project or a managed private cloud. Managed private cloud means like Snowplow is basically setting up everything in your cloud. This was really like a broad range of a product. So on the one hand, open source, where you have to do everything yourself. On the other hand, let's say this thing where they basically manage everything in your place to give you full kind of data ownership. But there's definitely a big space in the middle. And I think this space in the middle is super attractive because like there are enough companies who don't have the need yet to have everything within their own cloud and so on. And so for them, they had to go for their own maintenance, which sometimes they don't do. They don't have DevOps teams. And so I think this is super exciting, but they have to play it right. Because like I was always looking for an alternative to Segment and Rudderstack. So Segment and Rudderstack, if you have this use case where you need to send, let's say, plenty of data out to, I don't know, 20 destinations, yeah, it's fine. It works really good and really well. But often like, I don't know, most of the setups are not like this. Most of the setups are really like you have 1, 2, 3 different kind of, let's say, data destinations where you want to send the data to. So there's not really need to pay the extra money to basically run these kind of, how they call themselves, CDP. So I want to have the best, most solid data collection, because I think investing in data collection and have this separated from all your data stack will be becoming more and more important. And I think Snowplow is the best to get into this kind of category if they play it right. Because right now the preview of the cloud is pretty limited. So when it comes general available, it has to have really significant, the significant feature set to really compete with something like Rudderstack and Segment. So I'm hoping that they will have custom event and custom context available as quickly as possible. And I mean, this is like Snowplow. You can design really, really, really good tracking setups and data setups. And so this is something that they have to provide. So I'm pretty sure it will come, but it has to be there to be competitive. And the other thing is like, of course, like we need more destination support. So right now I cannot sync the data into BigQuery. So this has to be there. And what I also want to have, especially for these use cases where then some companies really want to send out the data to more destinations. So in the BDP platform, so like the managed private cloud platform, from Snowplow, there's a possibility that you can have an endpoint, I think they call it real-time endpoint, where you can basically, after all the data is collected, runs through the enrichment pipeline, gets checked if the data is in good state, and before it basically gets synced and saved into the database, you can basically point this data to other places as well. So you basically have a qualified data pipeline, and then you can send it out to different kind of destinations, which is super cool. And I hope that this one gets into the Snowplow cloud as well. So because if it gets, then I have a really strong case in all the different kind of projects where I usually had to pick something like Segment or Rudderstack to just do everything with Snowplow. So I'm hoping this gets there too. And the final part, of course, like competitive pricing. So the major complaint when I talk to people about Segment, the major complaint they have is like, yeah, it's too expensive. Whatever Snowplow is doing, it has to be competitive with Segment and Rudderstack, at least like on the same kind of level. Maybe even better, because Snowplow usually maybe can handle volume better. So maybe they have some volume-based pricing, but maybe in let's say in better steps. Let's see. So, but it cannot be totally off. Because then it becomes really hard to basically argue for them. And so I'm also putting now a little bit pressure on the Snowplow cloud product team. So please make it happen. I want this kind of solution there in 23, because like I want to put a lot of setups on this kind of Snowplow cloud. Prediction number 3. We will now start more and more layering on top of basic SQL. So people who know me a little bit know that I don't like to write SQL. Sometimes I even say I hate to write SQL, and sometimes if I do it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days constantly, yes, I start to hate it. Why do I hate it? I don't know, because I cannot really do the things that I can do usually when I write Python, where I can just I can debug it easily. I can test it easily, and so I can do a lot of things more easily, which are super hard to do with SQL. It's not SQL's fault. It's just like, I mean, the approach of it. But in the end, SQL is pretty powerful. I mean, you can, let's say 60 lines of code, you can basically really do a very advanced kind of access to your data and shaping of your data. So this all performant against a database, and it's a very common standard. So there are a lot of reasons why SQL is still there and will not go away, definitely not go away. But what I think is like what we will see more and more is like that people putting layers on top. So let's say DBT was the first kind of layer that we saw, and this was more like a connection layer. So it was more like connecting the different kind of, let's say, SQL queries that were floating around and maybe in some kind of repository already. And I think we will now see the next ones. I think we will now see like business building on top of DBT, because DBT, because it's so highly configurable, and because it can be easily extended, we will see more people now basically building on top of DBT and basically making things easier. So one example, for example, are my dear friends from Finland, from Reconfigured. And so what they do is basically like they give you an interface and also like a possibility to define a very holistic customer data model within their tool. So in this tool, you basically make sure, okay, what are the different kind of sources where I get my customer data? You match them up, so you decide, okay, how do we handle IDs? How do we handle email addresses? What are fallbacks? And so on. So all the nitty-gritty stuff that you have to do when you want to work with customer data, and that before you were writing in annoyingly boring SQL lines of things, and usually you screw up things because at some point you forget it to do it like this. So what they do is like they put an abstraction layer on top, and so now you basically configure everything in their tool, and in the end they just spill out DBT models for you. And I think we see more and more of that. We will now see more and more layers built on top, which I think is natural. So in software this is quite common. I mean, just ask front-end developers how many React frameworks are out there. So I think it's common because like if it's done well, we can achieve 2 things. So first is like, of course, we can speed things up. But secondly, we can introduce better quality in all the things. Because like, if we build on a different kind of layer and it goes down, we can establish quality standards within this layer. And then this is present in all SQL queries downstream, because it's basically maintained by the upper layer. So this is really cool. And my last prediction number 4, I think that, and I still don't have a good name for it, that pre-packaged data stacks will become more and more important than duct taping a modern data stack. So it's not a risky one. I think this is pretty obvious. So the modern data stack was always a great advertisement product. So it always sounded really, really great. So you basically, you have this huge selection. It's like going into a data toy store. So you go into a data toy store and you can just pick whatever you want. And everyone is basically promising you that it integrates super well with everyone else. So you can see on all data products out there, there will be an integration page. Integration is always like the part that people usually underestimate, and integration is hard. I think integration still is one of the hardest things in any kind of setup. So of course, like, it sounds great in theory that you have best of breed and you just buy the best data catalog, the best orchestrator, or whatever, and then you just hook it together and here we go. So this doesn't actually not really work unless you have a big team. You invested a lot in this integrating the things, which I think is possible, and I saw companies doing that. But it's an investment. It's not a small investment. I see more and more visibility of platforms who basically integrate the different kind of things what the modern data stack has. So like the stages of the modern data stack. So like from data integration into transformation, into modeling, storage, and then making it accessible for whatever, visualization, applications, data product, whatever. So these whole steps that you usually cover with different kind of tools, so they basically integrate everything in one platform. And they invest heavily to make the integration work. And this is the interesting part. And I see two kind of approaches right now. So one is like basically an integrated but still open kind of platform. So they do the integration on their end. And so, for example, this is something like Kibula or like Rivery. So you get data integration there, you get storage, you can transform, you can model the data, and you can then make it accessible for other kind of implementation. But some parts are definitely like proprietary within their platform, especially like the integration part. So how all these things play together. And this is what makes them super strong. So their strength is in this kind of integration meta layer. So they know when data comes from A and then ends up in, I don't know, D, what happens in between, because all the steps are happening on their kind of platform. But they're still open enough that you can just hook up different kind of other services as well. So they will save the data into a Snowflake instance that you can access as well. And I think it can also make it possible that smaller data engineering team can run bigger kind of stacks and application and use cases because some things are basically managed for them. And so this is, I think, super interesting. So I think something like Kibula and Rivery will definitely be even stronger next year, 100%. And there are also like other approaches as well, who basically, let's say, take not this fully integrated approach, but more like, okay, we put, let's say, a thinner layer on top of existing tools as well. So they're more focusing like on building this kind of layer. And so like, for example, there is 5x. So they basically create this layer across all the different kind of modern data stack products. So like Fivetran, Snowflake, I think Airflow as well. So I don't know, but different kind of things. And so they make sure that on the one hand, everything gets set up, that everything runs through one invoice. Then also like the integration parts of that, but I never really tested out, but I think it might be strong. So that you basically get rid of all the operations work that you usually have to invest. So this is interesting as well, because you might still use the tools where you see all this shiny advertisement for. And yeah, be happy about it, but someone is taking care that everything is orchestrated within. Or like you really have something like, for example, like Datacov, which I just discovered a week ago, which basically is doing the same approach, but on top of open source tools. So you basically can then hook up Airbyte, DBT, Superset, and so they take care that of all the operations part around it, so that it's basically connected and so on. What I'm really hoping for 23 and this coming back where I just started is like, I hope that we as data teams, of course, like improve ourselves a lot. And then, yes, this is culture, but it's important. So I hope that we really think more about, okay, what kind of impact we can do in this company. So how can we make the people better in the other teams? Because like we are in the end, we are the supporters of the other teams in best case. So we can really drive them and we can really bring them to levels that they never really thought that were possible. But for that, we have to get better to listening to them. So we have to talk their language. We have to cross the bridge to them and really understand what they do. We have to work with them more closely. We also have to lead them. So of course, like a lot of really crazy ideas are happening in marketing teams and so on, but we have to lead them. We have to take them by the hand and say, okay, I know where you want to go. Let us figure us out together where we can get there. But I can help you because I did this already. And then we focus down. We focus down on the ones where we can really see what can make an impact. And so that we basically can use the powers the data teams have, not just to create the next 76 Tableau dashboard, but to really create, I don't know, processes, applications, insight that can really change things within a company. So this is what I hope for 23. Besides, and I also hope for a lot of other things that don't fit into this video. So I hope this helps. Please hold me accountable next year about these things.